I'm Fritz. I'm president of the Clinton Taxpayers Association. We're very pleased to be able to put on this event tonight. We're glad so many people came out. I'm going to let Kirk do the introductions. I will simply introduce myself as the president, Kirk as the treasurer, Kirk Carr. In the back we have Elaine Lavelli, who is vice president, and Kirk's wife, who's always helped assisting us also. And also, don't forget, our website is gocta.org. And this is we're going to take this tonight also, but there's many other things that you will find on our website that I think will be of value to you. And I just would also like to indicate that we're always looking for any little donations that we can possibly get. This we're a volunteer, so we run on our donations. Kirk, you want to take it over?
Okay. Thank you very much, Pam. And thank all of you for coming out. I think we've been spoiled by the good weather, and suddenly it's turned a little nasty, so special thanks for coming out this evening. And thank you very much also. Obviously, we have Ona, who's on the Board of Finance, but Dolly Mazzetti, who's a selectman, and also on the Board of Appeals as an alternate. So we're very honored, as well as our tax collector, Ona Nejdl, who many of you probably know. So just to kind of set this up a little bit, we're probably all very much aware that over the last year or so, we've had a reval in Clinton, and the result has been quite an increase in our mill rate. As the grand list has gone down, the mill rate has gone up, and it's gone up about 11%. So we're here tonight to talk about appealing the assessments, whether you have a case or don't have a case. And we have some very great experts to inform you. Ona Nejdl, and it's pronounced Nejdl, as in Cradle. She reminds us of. She is a member of the Board of Finance, former member of the Assessment Appeals Board. She's also a premier realtor with William Ravis. And Jeff Gibson. Jeff is an appraiser. He will be coming up second in line. And then Tom Cronan, who is the senior partner in Cronan and Sweeney, will end, and he has quite a bit of experience in this area. So we think that between them you're going to learn a great deal. What we promised when we put out our flyer was that you learn what the grounds are for bringing an appeal, what your chances of winning an appeal are, what is the process of appealing, what information you need to be able to appeal, how do you get the assessor's field card, and then once you get it, how do you read that field card? What kind of help do you need to bring an appeal, and what would it cost to get help? And finally, how much might we save by appealing your tax? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ona, and it's up to you, Don.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you, my esteemed colleagues here, and members of the volunteers and members of the town. We're here to talk about tax appeals. And as I was thinking about this last night, I realized that the process is very much how I thought about sex when I was 12 years old. I knew it existed. I knew it was important. Thought it was really complicated, but I didn't know who to ask. So I hope we can clear the air on this whole process in terms of tax appeals, and prepare you to understand a little bit more about how the town collects your tax dollars and what the fair market value would be of any particular property. No two properties are the same. The first question is, why appeal? Well, the obvious question would be, the answer to that question would be that there's an error on your field card. You're being taxed for land or for square footage that you don't own. Every resident of Clinton has the right to get a copy of their town hall field card once a year for free. You come in and want another one, I think it's $1 to get this. This is not what's on visionappraisal.com. This is your complete card that has a lot of extra information that the board uses to know what your property is all about. If you look at that card and say, my goodness, they have me as a 5-bedroom and I'm only a 3-bedroom. It's a simple solution. You probably don't need to go through the appeals process. It's a matter of going into the town hall, meeting with the assessor, and straightening out the issue. There's a lot of complicated math that's integrated into this field card. Things like C factors, which represent what your neighborhood is like. Are you the best house in the neighborhood? Are you across from the cemetery, et cetera, et cetera. Jeff will probably more than be happy to express a little more information about all of those issues. But what you need to know is the basic information is correct on here. What language does the Board of Assessment Appeals speak? They speak market value, not assessed value. When I sat on the board, I found it very disconcerting that so many people came in and kept talking about the assessed value of their houses. The language we speak and the board speaks is market value, which is what you feel a person would pay you for the house. The assessed value is 70% of what that number is. It's by state law. So you have to understand that when you're talking about what your value is, it's not what your assessment is, what your taxes are based on. It's the market value of your house. Market value, appraised value. Appraised value is always 70% of market value. Talk the language of market values. Assess, thank you. Don't talk appraised value. The value is basically the assessor in town is an appraiser, just like Jeff. They look at all the properties, deem fair market value in order to tax you to get revenues. They're just like an appraiser. So the value on your card, on your field card, in this case, $950,000, I just grabbed one, is the fair market value of this house. Town is taxing you on 70% of that. You, everybody. We're all taxed at 70% of our market value.
Can I ask a question real quick? I don't understand, it says appraised up there, and you keep saying assessed. Is there a difference between the two?
Assessed is 70% of market value. I want to just use the term market value.
Okay, so,
Appraised and market are sometimes interchangeable.
Okay.
They confuse people. Market value, market value, market value. The cost of your house. Not the mathematical consideration done by the town to tax you at 70%. Now, the town, by state statute, they value our properties once every 12 years with a potential mathematical correction every 4 to 5. Sometimes towns don't do that mathematical correction because it costs too much. And in a downward trending market, there's no point that they're not going to get more taxes. In an upward trending market, they may want to do that mathematical correction to collect more funds. We had a total once every 12-year evaluation in this town based on sales from October 2009 to October 2010. So, when the evaluation of your property is based on those sales, not what occurred last week across the street, your neighbor sold their house, not what occurred 3 months ago on your street. That is the time in which all the evaluations are based and will be based for the next 5 years. So, what if you're wondering whether the number on here is an accurate market value of your property? You can go on sites online, get an idea online. Some of the sites are accurate, some of the sites are not. But the first place that one might want to start to get a true accurate number is an appraisal. a market value appraised evaluation by an appraiser is good in court, it's good for the appeals process, it will give you true value. Using the same criteria that the town does. What houses sold from October 2009 to October 2010 in Clinton are similar to yours. Yes?
Are you saying that the town has the option every 5 years of either revaluing or not revaluing? In other words, we have nothing to say about it.
Yes, that's by state statute, correct? Yes. The state of Connecticut says that the municipalities have the right to collect taxes from us. And the format used to be once every 10 years. But we had that upward trending 20% increase a year from 2000 to 2005. And the legislators thought, this is an opportunity for us to catch that wave of increased values. So they increased the time, but allowed this 5-year mathematical correction in. And that would be, and what years would those be based on, that mathematical correction that would occur in the next, in 2015?
If we did it in 2010, it would be
15, so they would look at house prices from 2000, the year of 2015.
So if in 2015, the value of the houses was still low, they could opt not to do it and just continue to collect the.
Yes, it really depends on market conditions and whether they have money in the bank to do that. It's expensive for a town, hundreds of thousands of dollars to do a valuation.
So chances are it would go up, but they would never go down.
Depends on the market. The market's been flat, the real estate market has been flat for 2-3 years. If it stays flat, maybe the town will do that, you know, that's out of our control. So, what are we talking about in terms of dollars and cents? You have a $300,000 house, you're taxed on $210,000, that's 70% of your market value. What's divided by 1,000?
For mill rate,
Oh, okay,
so you can multiply the mill rate.
I see. And so, our mill rate is currently 24.92. Which means your property tax on that $300,000 house is $5,233. $500,000 house, here's the math. Taxed at 70%, divided by the mill rate, and you get your tax to the town is $8,700. $700,000 house, you're paying $12,000. So, since the appeals process will stick for the next 4 years, till 2015 or potentially longer, what are your potential savings? Well, if you save $1,000 a year, you divide that by 4 years, you're saving $4,000 over 4 years. You, your market value on here is good until 2015. It may be good for longer. If you do an appeal and you win your appeal, your savings are every year, depending on the mill rate. The mill rate can go up and down in town. The town needs more money for tax purposes. So if you appeal a house valued $300,000 and find out it's really worth only $250,000, the money in your pocket that year may be $700 in tax savings, but that will potentially continue for the next 4 years. Save you $700 the following year, then the following year, and the following year, until your house is reassessed by the town.
If you appeal it and then you get say 3,000, you reduce it by whatever.
Right.
What savings is that? I thought it was like about 50 cents.
Well, you would take your, whatever the number is,
Yeah.
times 70%, times the mill rate, and there's your, the difference between the two. Yeah, and Tom will take you through that. This is one of the reasons why I'm sitting here tonight. When I sat on the board last year, I was saddened that most people who came before us didn't know how to fill the form out. And we only have 15 minutes at our table, and half of the time was taken showing people the proper way to fill out their appeals form. These are available in the assessor's office. And you have until February 20th to file an appeal.
Oh, then we have some that people want
Oh,
to
and
take
there's
a
some
look
here,
at.
if people would like them. You may already have one. The two obvious things, which were ignored so often is people didn't sign their appeal form and date it. Half of our appeals didn't have a signature on it. So the taxpayer, the name of the property owner goes up here, and you can appeal also your automobile taxes. Anything you pay property tax on in Clinton, or in any town, is subject to the appeal process if there's a problem. Obviously you know where you live, and the map, block, and lot number you can get from your assessor's card. This is also a key area that was often misfilled out. We spent a lot of time explaining. This is your idea of value, market value, not assessed value, market value. What is your house worth today, and why? Why? Do you have huge pool of wetlands behind you, and everybody else on the street has the same assessment, they have no wetlands? Do you have are you being taxed for a deck that doesn't exist? Are you being taxed on half acre of land when you only own a quarter of an acre? Whatever the issues are, you have to put your idea. Now, whether that idea of value comes directly from Jeff Gibson, from an appraiser, who's given you a solid number, or something that you've figured out on your own, that you estimate your own loss of value because of an issue with your property. You can go on visionappraisal.com and pull up all your neighbors' assessments. Everybody's market value, everybody's assessment. Visionappraisal.com. Go in Clinton, pull up your street, it's got your information and everybody else's. It's one place to start.
Excuse me, on a previous slide, it said the value of your neighbor's house is irrelevant.
Could be, yes. I mean, your neighbor could live in a 5,000 square foot colonial and you could be a 1,000 square foot ranch.
Okay, I understand that, but assuming that the houses are more or less equal in terms of square footage, the size of the lot, that sort of thing,
Yeah.
then does it become relevant?
It is relevant, yes. But what's more relevant is what has sold in Clinton that is similar to your size lot and your square footage from October 2009 to October 2010.
And how would you find that? How would you get that?
You can get that information here at the town hall records. They actually have a book that shows colonial ranches, mobile homes.
Does it have a thing that shows neighborhood, like the sale by date?
It
Like
has it
on
by
my
date,
street,
it
could I
has it
look up
by
the sale by
style
date?
of house.
Has it by address and by style.
Oh,
And then you know your neighborhood, look at the streets in the neighborhood.
okay,
You can do it by address and it goes alphabetical from A to Z.
right.
And then there's another book that's for style, for ranches, colonial
Oh.
escapes, raised ranch, split, whatever.
Okay.
And I'm going to sit because I am over my minutes and I feel like I'm probably not. So I'm going to turn this over to Jeff Gibson, the appraiser. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jeff Gibson. I work for Appraisal Associates in New England. I've been an appraiser for the past 22 years. I've worked in almost every town in the state of Connecticut. It's the same situation in every town. Every town goes through this during different years. What happens, if you want to contest your taxes, the first thing I always say to somebody is I say, here's the value that the town gave for your house. Can you sell your house for that much? And a lot of times people say, oh, I can get more than that. Well, you just answered your own question. You know, that if If you think on this value, but again, it's not today, you have to say to yourself, could I have gotten this much money on October 1st of 2010? And that's not, because what happens, I have to do the same thing that the town did. The town used sales from October 1st of 2009 to October 1st of 2010 to come up with the value of your house. So in order for me to compare apples to apples, I have to do the same thing.
What happens if a house is underwater and somebody has to sell? How does that affect the area?
Not literally underwater.
Upside down.
Right. Exactly.
Makes sense.
A short sale, a foreclosure.
Yes.
I don't know how the town deals with it. I don't know whether the town just throws them out, whether, because they take every sale from that period. I don't know if they put in the distress sales or not. If I'm comparing houses, I try to do whatever I can not to use distressed houses, but if that's the only thing that's sold in the neighborhood, that's the market. So if the only sales in the neighborhood that are comparable to your house are distressed sales, that's, you know, it's kind of, those houses have just knocked your value down. Correct. Now, one of the things that, that Ona said, again, I have to do an appraisal, I have to be totally independent, make just a totally objective view of your house. I do an appraisal the same way every single time. It doesn't matter whether you're selling, refinancing, divorce, bankruptcy, probate, whatever. It's always, what's the house worth today if you had to sell it today, based on what's sold around you. As similar to your house as possible, as proximate to your house as possible, and as recent as possible. And in this case, I'd have to go from October 1 of 2009 to October 1 of 2010. Now, one of the things that Ona was saying, talking about, if you have differences, and you look at your field card, you have differences that, you know, they put a deck on that shouldn't be there, something like that. I think if you just go to the assessor's office and talk to them and show them that it's not there, they'll take care of that.
I have to interject, and this town hall is very user-friendly when it comes to those items, and the assessor has actually physically gone to people's houses and said, my goodness, yes, there isn't a deck there, or whatever. So that's, you know, that can take place.
Exactly. I was doing an appraisal here in town just this morning, and I said, well, that's not here, and she said, okay.
Often also, the picture is wrong. This may not be your house.
Exactly.
That happens a lot.
Exactly. One thing, a few years ago, I got a phone call from the assessor in Lisbon, asking me the question because they were going through reval, and she said she had gotten a bunch of phone calls from people who, they said, well, I have a 3-bedroom house, but one's a den and one's a TV room, so can you change my field card to a 1-bedroom house? So she immediately called me and said, do I really want to be doing that? And I said, no, because then if she changes it to a 1-bedroom house, when it comes time for you to sell, all of a sudden, it's going to show up as a 1-bedroom house, even though there's other rooms. So don't ask for those kind of questions. Don't go and ask them for that kind of stuff. But if you see something that's wrong on the card, by all means, go in there and ask them. And I bet you they'll be fair with you. But if you really think, be honest with yourself. If you think at the end of the day that no, my house wasn't worth that much on October 1st of 2010, it was worth a lot less, then you know then go to the next step, and you know if you want to have it appraised.
Can I interject one thing about bedrooms? That's a big issue. A lot of people think a bedroom is a room with a closet. Most of the towns now say, no, a bedroom is a room with privacy, it has a door, with reasonable access to a bathroom. Square footage is 8 feet. If you have sloping ceilings, the 8 feet part is your living area. So these are the kinds of things that Jeff can detail with you, but this thing about rooms, what doesn't have a bed in it? But if it has privacy and has reasonable access to a bed, bathroom, it's considered a bed.
It also depends, if you're in an area that you don't have city water and city sewer, if you have a house where you have a septic system.
We all do.
Is septic
The
the
whole
whole town? Okay, well then your septic is based on your bedrooms. So you can't say I have 5 bedrooms if you only have a 4-bedroom septic system. So, and your septic, it depends on how big your tank is.
So closets don't come to bear?
Well,
Not anymore.
it depends, because what if you have a house down the street that was built in 1850?
Yeah.
They really didn't have closets. If they had them, they had these little, they had the big,
Armoires.
the armoires.
Yeah,
So, or especially the beach houses.
yeah.
They're there, you came down with bathing suit and shorts. You didn't, so now the houses that are being retrofitted to be year-round, now they need the closet space that they didn't have before, when the houses were built in the 20s and 30s.
But the town isn't gonna be fooled by music room, den, TV room, exercise room, if it has privacy and reasonable
But
access.
the criteria, just so I understand, is in proximity to the bathroom, not necessarily a closet, so you can have a room without a closet.
Correct, but privacy, if it doesn't have a door on it, if it's just an open
Yeah,
area.
open space.
Right.
That's key. Sorry, there's a lot, I mean, we all know the lingo because we've been doing this for years and years and years, and I know it's a lot to us.
Jeff, I understand you can get your own card free. Can you get other people's cards so you can compare them to yours?
When you're in town hall, there's file cabinet right there, you can look up, you can pull out your whole street. You can pull out your whole street, there's cards there, there's the sales cards. You can also, like she said, you can go on visionappraisal.com. The only thing with Vision Appraisal doesn't have all the information on your house. It has probably about 80% of the information, it doesn't have, so.
It doesn't have your building permits, for
It doesn't have the
example.
building permits, it doesn't have anything in the comment section, so what happens when I do an appraisal, if I go on Vision Appraisal before I get out to the town, just so I know kind of what I'm looking at, then I automatically go in and pay the $1 for the field card, so that I have everything.
And these are $1, but you get one for free, everybody in town can get one for free, you're right? Yeah.
I have a question on the appeal card, because I did an appeal, and I went to the town hall the day before, and I got the card. And when I went in, I had all the questions, everything there was a shed that wasn't taxed since 1976, that suddenly was taxed. So I went in, and when I was speaking to the guy from Vision Appraisal, he had a card, and I had the one from the town hall that I had just gotten printed, and there were 2 different cards. So I asked him if I could see his card, and I said, how is yours different, and why wouldn't I have that information? So I went over it the night before, and he said, we asked the town to give them out. So I went back to the town hall and asked him why I didn't have my updated card, and I was told that they didn't have the authority to release them yet. And I said, then why are we having hearings when I can't even dispute, I got something different here, and you have something different there? And I never got an answer, but I had a little thing in the town hall, I was
Was this
very
last
upset. Huh?
Was this last year?
This was last February.
Pre-
Yes, I had a completely
Oh,
different
okay.
card from the guy
So
that
maybe
was
they just didn't have them
interviewing me.
yet.
It was the beginning of the,
Okay.
So what happened?
It must have been that they didn't have the cards ready to print yet.
Then why did we have hearings? And how could we dispute something when we didn't even know what the town was charging?
I don't know.
That that was really bad, I thought.
So the next day, they're all done.
Oh, yeah, after the hearings were over. I'm amazing.
They were atrocious.
I'm just surprised you don't have the answer.
I don't work
Vision
for, I don't
Appraisal.
work for Vision Appraisal.
But you just said the card hadn't, it wasn't even that, it was for a previous session, or a previous year.
Right.
Previous
I don't work for Vision Appraisal and I don't work for the town, so I
You
don't
guys
know.
you don't understand that? It seems pretty straightforward.
Well, if I understand the question is, why did she get an incorrect card from the town?
Because the old.
I got it the
The
day
appraisal
after.
upon which she was appealed,
Right.
isn't that right?
Well, I don't know what card she got, so
Yeah. I I got one that was different from the one he had, the information was different, because I said, could I see yours? And he said, we asked the town to give these out, and they didn't. So I went to the town hall and I said, this is what the guy from Vision Appraisal told me. And why hold a hearing when we don't have what you're really gonna tax us on? And hopefully they won't do that in the future, because it was very upsetting. I took a long time to figure out what I was doing, reading the cards, what was an OB and outbuilding, looking up everything. It took me hours. And then I go in there and find out I don't have the same card as he has.
Ona, I think she may be,
Yes,
I think she may be confusing talking to Vision with talking to the
right.
the Board of Appeals.
Vision Appraisal was hired by the town to do the reevaluation process. And they had hearings at the library for anyone. And they were based on, you got a letter in the mail that said your new assessment is.
Yeah.
Right, the Newfield, the Newfields card hadn't come out yet, apparently, or hadn't been printed yet. And I don't know why the town would not give you one or whatever, and why they had one and you didn't.
Well, I got it the day before.
But it was within the process time. What we're talking about here is the annual February appeal process in Clinton, which is done by, in this building, with town volunteers.
I have a question. If you don't have a standard home, it's not raised ranch or split or colonial or whatever, it's a custom home, how do you evaluate what your house is going to be raised at in relation to what's sold in the area if there's nothing quite like it in the area?
I have to go till I can find what's comparable. If sometimes, especially like if I'm working for waterfront properties, if there's not enough waterfront properties in Clinton, I'll have to go to surrounding towns. So I have to get the best possible information to compare to your house, and wherever I can get that. As similar, as recent, everything, as proximate. Try and find stuff in town, but if you have an absolutely unique house that I still have to come up with a value for it. So I have to figure out what it's worth. So when I was doing tax appeals in Old Saybrook, especially waterfront stuff, try and compare Fenwick to other properties. That I was going up and down, from Branford to Stonington, using waterfront properties. But again, that's what the assessor in Old Saybrook had to do too. Because
Vision Appraisal do that when they go out of it?
I don't know, because I don't work for them. So I don't know whether whoever's doing the reval, whether they just stayed in town or on unique properties, or whether they went out to a larger scope. I don't know.
I have a question. Let's say your house is appraised, say hypothetically, say $500,000. You think it's worth $4. The appraiser comes in and says, man, this is worth $650. Now what happens?
Nothing. Go home.
Yes.
The town doesn't go, we like this.
Well, I mean, if you get an appraisal or that is worth presenting to the board, and they don't listen to you, then you talk to Tom, who will take it to court, and the court, if you have an appraisal, the court really has to smile upon it. If your appraisal comes out at 600, well, I'm only being taxed at 500.
End of conversation.
Do I
That was
want
my
to buy? I
question.
want to pay the fair amount. Maybe I want to tell the town.
Not likely.
What is an appraisal normally? If I wanted to hire you to come and do an appraisal of my home. What is it usually cost to do an appraisal of home?
It depends on if it's a unique property or a waterfront property. A typical normal house in town is $350. If it's something that is unique, $3 million waterfront, something like that, I'd have to look at what I'm going to have to do, and it would be on a case-by-case basis.
Should we let Tom?
Sure. Yeah. If you have other questions after, it's fine.
Thanks all for coming out. I hope everybody grabbed at least two sheets, the ones I care about. I don't care about anyone else's sheets, but you should have two sheets. One, they're both got a caption at the top, Tax Fight Workshop. One's the Tax Appeal Roadmap, and the other one's got a little table on it, how your taxes are calculator. If you don't have one, you can get you one. Those are some things you can take away from here tonight and look at it. You've got tired of listening to all of us. What I want to do is really kind of fill in maybe some of the spaces in the flyer that maybe haven't been covered. And so because I'm kind of going last and picking up the pieces, I'll be a little bit out of order. One thing I guess I want to say right away, Ken had a question about what Jeff referred to as a distressed property. In my experience, the town's valuation process does not reflect distressed properties. It just doesn't. It's just not set up to do that. As much as the statute says they're supposed to look at every property individually, it would cost them billions of dollars to do that. So they take kind of a broad brush approach. And frankly, there's some merit in that, because what I'm willing to pay for a piece of property is really, in my mind, independent of whether or not you own it free and clear or you're upside down with a mortgage. So I don't think it's a crazy position to take. But in my experience, the individual nuances of a particular property's relationship to its mortgage balance or whatever, that doesn't have a lot of play into it. So let's talk about the grounds for the appeal. There's basically two bases for appeal. There's a good one, and then there's a piggyback one. The basic claim, and most tax appeals that are brought under Connecticut Statute Section 12-117A, and basically the claim is that your property's been wrongly valued. The town says it's worth X, and you think it's not worth X. Typically, you think it's a lot less than X. The question was asked, if it's a lot more than X, you probably don't want to go complain about it. Although I actually had a case in Madison, I was representing the town in an appeal brought by the Beach Club, and Judge DeMayo got so angry at the Beach Club that he actually raised the assessment, and we had to go into chambers, and I had to explain to him that I didn't want to have to appeal the win. So he came back down to the town's valuation. But in any case, what I see a lot of, this just can't, or this, you're going to get a lot of kind of practical, I hope practical information. I get a lot of people who come in and say, the town says that my property is worth $500, and I think it's worth $300. Well, what would you sell it for? I would take less than $900 for it. You're going to be on the stand and someone's going to ask you that, and you probably don't want to have written me a check for $1,500 to lose the case out of your own mouth. So, but people do think that way. It's a little odd to hear, but people do think that way. So don't fall into that trap. The other basis for the appeal, and this kind of goes to the relevance of your neighbor's property. When we bring tax appeals into court, we always bring a 2-count complaint. We say you screwed up the value of my property, and oh, by the way, the whole valuation is bunged up. We throw that in because it doesn't cost any more to do that. I had a set of cases over in Guilford where there were some real anomalies. There was a neighborhood that was valued, kind of in this range, and then you had a really obvious high rent zone that was valued considerably below that. And I'm only talking land values because house values can be very, very subjective. But an acre of land on the water, to me, is pretty much an acre of land on the water. And, whether it faces east or west, it probably shouldn't make a lot of difference, but that's a lawyer's deal. So those are appeals brought under Section 12-119. If I were you, I would not trouble the Board of Assessment Appeals with an appeal that says, my house has got the highest valuation in the neighborhood, all my neighbors are lower. And the reason I wouldn't trouble them with that is that doesn't answer the fundamental question of, are you too high or are they too low? I understand the emotional element of that, but I just don't think it carries the day. And these people, the volunteers, and I don't, they're going to be there working late at night, and they can't help you, and you're taking up their time, and you're going to get nothing out of it, and they're just going to spend their time. So I'm sorry to be a wet blanket on that, but that dog doesn't hunt very well. All right, the process for appealing, the tax appeal roadmap that I've given you here. In most towns, and that's probably not the case this year, In most towns, there's 3 levels available to you. The first one, which I think probably was available last year but won't be available this year, is an informal meeting with the company that actually does the revaluation. Go, have a discussion, maybe there's some help, maybe there's not some help. Don't go, it doesn't matter. You can go or not go to meet with Vision Appraisal. Go to see them, don't go to see them. You may get something if you go, but if you don't go, you don't lose anything. The second step in the process is entirely different. I called it in here, I think I called it the Board of Tax Review. I think in this town it's the Board of Assessment Appeals. Different names for the same thing. This you can't miss. The appeal has to be filed, can't be filed until February 1, and has to be filed no later than February 20. You miss that, wait till next year. Can't come back. And if you do not go to the Board of Assessment Appeals, you cannot go to court, right? You cannot go to court. There's a doctrine called the doctrine of exhaustion of administrative remedies. If you haven't tried to resolve it with the Board of Assessment Appeals, the court will not take the case, period. Lack of jurisdiction. So you have to go to BAA, like it or not. And you can go and get nothing, or you can go get some relief or whatever, but if you don't go to the Board of Assessment Appeals, you cannot go to court at all. You can go to the Board of Assessment Appeals by yourself. You don't need a lawyer. Frankly, you don't really need an appraisal, but I would encourage you to have one, so that you're not just sitting there saying, I just think you made my, set my value too high. And for $350, $500, whatever, take the chances. Because we're going to do the calculation in a minute. I'm going to try to give you what your upsides are and downsides are when you go through this process. Court appeal. Court appeals are expensive. Our standard engagement letter that we send out to people who want to do court appeals, about 4 or 5 pages long, and 3 pages of that is devoted to the economics. Here's what you can expect if you hit a home run, and here's what's going to cost. And if at the end of the day you don't think you've got a good chance of netting money, I don't want you going to a cocktail party and saying, well, Cronan saved me $5,000, but it cost me 10. I don't really, that's nice money for me, but it doesn't do much for my reputation. So we turn 10 cases away for everyone we have a chance to do. I don't think everybody does that, but it just seems to me to be right. The appeal has to be filed. It has to be drafted. It needs to be given to a marshal. It's served on the town. It gets filed in court. Right? $300, $400, $500 in. You haven't paid the lawyer yet. All you paid is the marshal in the court to get the case started. The next thing that's likely to happen is not a trial. It's a pre-trial. Which you go up to court. You might go. Your lawyer will go for sure. Your appraiser will go for sure. So now you're paying the lawyer and an appraiser to go to court to try to settle this. One of the other things I'm going to jump around with, what are your chances of winning? I would say that 1 in 1,000 tax appeals is actually won. Well, no. 1. By either side. By either side. Because they all get settled. They all get settled. 999 out of 1,000 get settled. I haven't done a study, but they get settled. And they get settled for good reason. You go to the pretrial and the town says, well, look, we don't want to spend a lot of money fighting this. You don't want to spend a lot of money fighting this. A number is put on the table. You can take that number or not take that number. But when that number is put on the table, now your upside of pursuing the trial goes down. If you're arguing about a $100,000 difference in fair market value, and the town says, we'll give you 60, and I'm picking just a number that's not in the middle, we'll give you 60, I'm not sure it's worth it to you to go fight for the remaining 40, especially after you run that 40 through the 70% times the mill rate and everything else. What's left in your pocket? So you say, what are your chances of winning? You've got to understand what winning means. I don't like winning. What are your chances of coming out of this with a net economic benefit? All right? And that depends, frankly, on how big a difference there is between what the town's value is and what you think the value is. I get calls from people who live in houses like I have lived in for a long time. I bought in Madison when I was about 26 or 7 years old. I think I paid $47,000 for my house. And, I think it went all the way up to 300 or something. But quite honestly, if the tax assessor, if I said it was worth 250, or if I said it was worth 3, and the tax assessor said it was worth 350, if I wasn't a lawyer, I wouldn't, and even being a lawyer, I wouldn't waste my time going to court about that. It just, the pot of money at the end of the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow just doesn't justify it. Go to Board of Tax Review if you want, maybe you get some relief. It doesn't cost anything. But to go into court, and again, I mean, I feel like I'm a bit of a wet blanket here, but I know that there are lawyers who will stand up here and say, oh, go to court, go to court, go to court. But keep in mind that you go to court, money goes in their pocket. So you gotta ask yourself why I'm telling you not to. Maybe I'm the dumbest guy in it. All right. So you're gonna go to the pretrial. And if it doesn't settle at the pretrial, you're gonna go to trial. And sometimes you go to multiple pretrials. And every time you go, you're probably paying your lawyer, probably paying your appraiser. By the way, there are some lawyers who might do this on a contingency. We don't, but others do. If you can find someone to do it and only collect if they win, maybe that's a different story. What happens when you go to trial? At trial, it's basically a battle of the appraisers. The town has an appraiser. Now, here's what happened with the town. The town got a value from the revaluation company. That's one value. Then the town goes out and actually hires an appraiser. I think you do it this time. I think you have to. The town hires its own professional appraiser at its expense, or has one on kind of retainer. You have your appraiser. The two appraisers put their testimony on in front of the judge. And now you're into the wonderful world of courts. And in court, it is, what is it, Tuesday was Anything Can Happen Day on the Walt Disney Club, Mickey Mouse Club. There are some judges who split the baby in half. There are some judges who hate towns. There are some judges who hate taxpayers. There are a lot of judges who hate rich taxpayers who live in multi-million-dollar houses who want to reduce the taxes. And you get the result that you get from that judge. If you were in front of a different judge, maybe a different answer. So you got to weigh that as well. Let me try to go quick here so I don't take up a lot more time. When you go to, let's see, how much does an appeal cost? Board of Assessment Appeals you can do yourself. I recommend you do. You don't need to have your appraiser with you when you go to BAA. And if you've never been to BAA, don't be shocked when you discover that your ear time in front of them is 10 or 15. 15 minutes is actually a lot. It's very short. Get to the point. What are you driving at? What's your evidence? Don't waste these people's time. Okay? Pictures, yeah, pictures are very, very helpful. All right. I want to quickly spend a minute on the how are your taxes calculated handout, if you have that. Your actual tax liability is not based solely on your assessed value. I think there was a chart up here before, but you see it here. I've given you a table that has 3 hypothetical values. That's what the property might sell for, the fair market value. Take that, multiply it by 70%, multiply it by the mill rate. Actually, what I've done is I've taken the mill rate, the 24 point something, whatever it is, and actually divided it by 1,000. So the arithmetic number is the 0.02492 and so on. And then multiply that times the assessed value, and that's your annual real estate tax. At the bottom of that page, you say the key question for any taxpayer contemplating appeal is whether the potential tax savings at stake justify the expenditure. So here's the formula. You want to flip this over and follow, or you can follow the numbers. Question number 1. Do I think the town set a fair market value on a property that's too high? Yes? No? If the answer to that is yes, number 2, what is the difference? What you think it's worth versus what the town thinks it's worth. What is that number? Let's say it's $100,000, just because I can do $100,000 in my head and I can't do anything else in my head. I might not even be able to do the 100. $100,000 difference, okay? Multiply that difference by the assessment ratio of 70%. Because your fair market value in your world is going to come down by 100. That means a change in assessed value of 70% of that That's 70,000, multiply the 70,000 times the mill rate, and if you're right, and if you win, your taxes will go down by that number. You're almost there. What we tell clients, take that number and multiply it by the number of years left until the town is going to revalue you. And that is often the number of years, it's 5 minus the number of years, in most towns, the number of years since the revaluation. So if it turns out that you're going to save $2,000 a year for 5 years, and in this case you've got 4 left, you're going to, if you hit this $100,000 home run, you're going to put $10,000 in your pocket. So you've got to have some confidence about your $100,000 number. Now you've got to figure out what's that going to cost me. If I can get half of it when I go to Board of Assessment Appeals, go home. Go home. If you don't get any of it at Board of Assessment Appeals and you really believe in your heart that you're right, now you get into the expense of lawyers, appraisers, and so on. And I told you here, someplace in here, maybe I haven't told you here, some lawyers will do this on a contingent basis. If they do it on an hourly basis, you're very likely to be looking at a bill that you get from the lawyer that can get to $2,500 very quickly. If it's $500 just to pay the marshal and the court entry fee, lawyers charging $200 an hour or more, it isn't going to take a lot of time before you've spent $2,000 on the lawyer. You've spent money on the appraiser. You need to do that. You're going to spend money on the appraiser to go to court to testify. So you're chewing into that hypothetical $10,000 number, you know, and those are real dollars. When you take the appeal, you're spending money. Win or lose, coming out the back end, you're spending money. So, let's see. I'm sorry to have done so quickly. I tried to fill in some of the pieces, try to give you something that I think is practical advice. I would rather, personally, see you not take an appeal than go through the process and the emotional toll of the process and come up empty. If you've got a decent claim, go make it. The last thing I'll tell you, which is just personal opinion, and I don't mean to offend anybody by saying this, but in my experience, the real money to be made in a tax appeal by you traces back to land values. When it gets into values of improvements, it's awfully subjective. You know, is a 12 by 12 bedroom different than a 12 by 14 bedroom? Maybe, but if it's $100 difference in value times 70%, you're saving quarters and you know, nickels and dimes. So, in my opinion, and I may be wrong about this, but in my opinion, the real issue has to be that the land is substantially different. I would say one last thing about that. Not everybody shares this. Some judges don't share this. Over in some of the neighboring towns, they adopt the philosophy that a building lot is a building lot is a building lot. So there used to be a lot of waterfront property in Madison. It was only 5,000, 6,000 square feet. And Madison used to like to value those properties at like $5 million. The land at $5 million because it's waterfront, you can put hacienda on it. Well, if it's a 5,000 square foot lot and you got 10% coverage, your $10 million house is going to have a 500-foot footprint. So unless you really like one of those fire towers, okay, and you also have height limitations, to me, zoning limitations do play a role in what a piece of land is worth. So an acre on the water that you can put a gigundo house on is probably worth a lot of money. But you reach a point where that lot shrinks down where you just can't build a house and sell it for a price that's really going to justify that kind of land value. So if you have a piece of land with some zoning oddities, you may have a claim, you know, a cognizable claim with the tax appeal. So, sorry for running over, but,
Well, if anybody has any questions, I think you asked most of them. Go ahead.
yes.
If the town makes an adjustment on a property, year after it's been appraised, and we had a piece of property that was appraised at 600% more than what it should have been, the town came down the following year. Is the town obligated to pay you for that difference of the year that you paid extra taxes? Well, that's not fair.
I'm a perfect example of that. My property was never surveyed. It's been, the house was built in 1905. It's an old country house, on the water, but a country house. We never had a survey. The town thought we had a quarter of an acre of land, when in fact we had 0.12 of an acre of land. And for my family, it's been in my family since 1955. Since 1955, we've been paying too much tax on this land. And the land is 90% when you get near the water of your taxable market value. So, no, you don't get to get it.
We were fighting this for a year. I mean, it wasn't just the spur of the moment, a year later.
I don't wanna say, you know, mine's worse than yours, but I had a client come to me right over the river in Madison, right over the river. His family was taxed for 20 years on 2 pieces of land. They only owned 1. The exclusive remedy for improper taxation is a tax appeal. And if you miss that February, and by the way, it could be improper for a variety of reasons. It could be the wrong value, or they could be taxing you on 3 pieces of land and you don't own any, but it's still the same mistake. The exclusive remedy is a tax appeal brought every year. Is it fair? Maybe not, but it's what the law is, so.
I find it interesting that the tax appeal is always in February, when there are an awful lot of people in these shoreline towns, which are vacation homes for a lot of people. They're not around.
Except by state statute, there's nothing, I mean, there's nothing.
Oh, it is, okay.
It's not something Clinton does.
All right, I thought that did Clinton. It did Steve, okay. Sorry.
I've got a question for you. You made a statement about looking at property and the value of the land. The key factor.
That's my personal bias.
Okay, now, does it sound fair that when the property was reevaluated in Clinton, I did the entire street, and I equated everything back to a per acre value, so you're looking at everything on the same basis. The smaller the lot, the higher the value.
Yes,
Does that sound?
yeah, and I can explain that to you.
Well, I'd love to understand that.
Okay, the explanation for that, the word that describes it is fungibility, all right? And I'll give you, let's start with this assumption. Let's start with the assumption that every lot on the street is at least a building lot that meets the minimum requirement of zoning. And then and let's say that that's a half an acre. So you have one lot that's a half an acre. The lot next door is 0.6 acres, 0.7 acres, 0.8 acres, 0.9 acres. And I want to stop right there, because I don't want to get to the point where you could have a lot big enough to split it into 2. Each of those lots, the basic, the way most towns value, and I welcome input from anyone here who is doing this, most towns take the approach that a building lot is a building lot is a building lot. Now, there's a little bit of an adder for what they call excess acreage, but it doesn't come down to a per square foot or a per acre basis. So when you do the arithmetic on what I just described, and let's say that it's $100,000 an acre. The half acre lot is going to be $200,000 per acre. Is that right? Am I doing math the right way? Do I go the right direction? Yeah. The 0.6 acre lot is going to be someplace around maybe $180,000 an acre. The 0.7 is going to be about $165,000, but all that's happening is the value of a building lot, which is a constant, is being divided by a different denominator. So I know it seems anomalous, but there is a reasonable explanation for it, because your half acre lot and your 6/10 of an acre lot, and your 7/10 of an acre lot, as a land element, it's still one building lot. One's a little bigger than the other, but it's still a building lot.
Just the first time it's been explained.
Well, and you don't necessarily have to like the explanation, but I mean, if the explanation saves you from spending money on an appeal that you can't win, then it's beneficial.
But nobody could explain that. The appraisers, Vision Appraisal couldn't? The Board of Appeals couldn't? No.
Well, hopefully I
One lot,
give you
one-
some idea.
One lot, one house.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I want to thank our panel. We've kind of run over our hour, but I hope everybody got some insights that they didn't have before. And if you want to stay, I gather the panel might be prepared to answer a few questions offline. We do have some membership applications if you're not a member. Also some nice donor cards if you'd like to make a donation. But I want to very much thank our panel tonight. And I want to thank all of you for coming out on such a nasty evening. And I hope that you'll agree that you learned something and hopefully it's useful to you. So thank you very much.